So hey, this is another Facebook lesson page. My students here, at the end of the semester, posed a hard problem to talk about brushes, jazz time, and Latin. This is our last week of classes, so hopefully you can tune back in, come see us again throughout the summer. We'll have some more master classes. And so this is a huge problem, but I think I've come up with an idea. These are sandpaper blocks, and the first sound that helped evolve jazz and brushes was sandpaper blocks, of all things. When the early drummers were playing jazz and first starting it, it was based off of the snare drum. And a lot of people have heard this kind of sound. That was sometimes some of the early Dixieland, some kind of the early feel. Band directors have always wanted us to play softer. And for some ballads, before brushes were discovered, they figured out that sandpaper blocks would happen. Soft, and probably for most directors, they may really like that. How that transferred was by about mid-teens, right about World War I, they discovered these things. And we'll watch this when I do this. You can see this. These were the very first Alice and Weems, or Alice and Weems, and some people call it Alice and Weems fly killers. These were, when you hear about swats, these were fly killers. This is what they used to swat flies. And you could buy them at hardware stores for about a nickel a piece. And the idea was that you could retract it and put it in a drawer. It didn't take all the room. It wasn't those ones that you hang from the refrigerator on the back door or the porch or something like that. They were these. And these are, sometimes you'll hear they call it swat the fly or something like that. They were called fly killers at first. And these are 1915 originals. Actually, 1913 was when they first got a patent. And these are almost like museum pieces. These were some of my prized possessions, all right? But you can see that the brush hasn't changed much. Yeah, from all this. And they figured out that when they first did that they played the brushes like sticks. Single stroke rolls, and so they don't hurt these. I'll make sure, pass around, be real careful. I'll pass one that way, pass one this way so everybody can take a look, and you can open and close them, just be careful of the rules. Like I said, 1913. So, they played right on the rim, and they usually used the rim. And sometimes for concert playing and things like that, you could use that sound. But you can tell, it doesn't put out a lot of sound. Most of the time when you see a brush part on a snare drum part, you in kind of a dead stroke, and if you think of your hand, you're going to actually play at the base of the brush, and then the wires go out. And so if you have hear the difference? Yeah. The one thing that happens in jazz is that most of the time, symphonic playing, you'll tend to find that they'll have the snares on. In jazz, when they play brushes, they have the snares off. Saying you're already putting wires on the drum head, so why do you need to close it? And it does change the sound. It opens up the drum a little bit. See what I mean? It gives it a little more characteristic. And when you listen to older recordings, that's the sound you'll hear, kind of that kind of sound on the snare drum. When they first started doing it, and why this will all connect in a minute, bear with me, is that, all right, we had this 2 and 3. The accent for swing happens from 2 and the 3, 4 to 1. Was not created, we think of us as always being the rhythmic expert. Jazz feel happens melody, and the drummers had to fill in the back. We were way behind as far as the rhythmic feel of jazz. We tried to emulate what we heard on that. So later on, people figured out that, wow, I can drag the brush. And they would literally take the brush and pull it, and they would tap with the left hand. And they would probably play traditional back then. And once in a while, you'll see British players play it like this. You see, and they did that. It wasn't until the late 40s that a drummer by the name of Denzel Best, who played with George Shearing, really experimented with side-to-side motion. A lateral motion is pretty much the norm. And after you play, this is kind of the standard beat that everybody kind of knows. Whether you play traditional, then the right hand plays over the top. Sometimes you see in the book, you'll see the circle motion, but listen to the sound. You got smoother, legato, all right? See how that phrases? And that's the jazz sound that sometimes you say, da, ding, da, ding, da, da, all kinds of different sounds that you hear. And if you play match, you just flip over and your angle goes just a little more towards the left and front that way and do the same movement. So you can see how everything is moving this way and crossing, okay? And if you think about it, that motion was exactly, right, that. Right, get the feel, okay, get the feel again. Feel that? Yeah, all right, so what we've done real quick is this to the real cram course in this, is that the sound is legato and smooth and connecting. And it's really weird. As drummers, we think very, very up and down, very staccato, very, very piston-like. But here, we start to do this. And even when you describe music, I don't know anybody that goes, if you mention jazz, they would go, oh yeah, ding, 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 ding. Nobody goes, all right, nobody does that. But that's exactly what has to happen with brush, and that's where our phrasing really started to take hold. From the early, like jazz beat on the snare drum, you were trying to emulate that by dragging the brushes, okay? And that's why if you gotta have a smooth head like this isn't a good idea, because it doesn't make a lot of noise. And where the fiber heads are real nice and there's different ones, but you try to get that. So why is that phrasing so important? Well, the phrasing is important for that main reason of the jazz feel. Starting with the cymbal and going 2 to 3, 4 to 1. And you have to do it with your hand. And I'm going to take, first of all, a really beat up drumstick, a stick that you would say, well, this isn't any good, okay? And the importance of why I do this at first is to talk about the feel and what the old New York drummers used to call in stroke. Now this is going to shock a lot of all of you, especially my students, and it's the study of motion, okay? And I know none of you have ever heard that. But being in stroke is being so relaxed and that you're perfectly hitting the cymbal that even a funky stick like this will ping. You don't need a nylon tip. And if you see some of the old drummers and look real close at their sticks, they're beat up. They didn't have a lot of money. They had to keep them going for a long time. And their cymbal would still sound good. So let's see if we can do that. Let's see if the old guy can do that here, all right? So when we first start out, you kind of hear the stick sound kind of dead right there. Hear that sound? And we're going to use our phrasing, 2, a 3, 4, a 1. And I'm going to relax. And all of a sudden, you're going to start to hear it start to ding. Yes, no? Is there a change? Yeah. And yeah, change. So by John Varnola, who was Stan Kenton's, one of his drummers, and really spent a lot of time. And what happens, you'll almost get kind of a tingling, warm feeling if you're doing it. And if you'll notice, I'm not working very hard when I'm doing it. And all of a sudden, the sound opens up. Does the tape go up? Yeah. And you can hear that nice, smooth sound. And my hand's starting to tingle a little bit. It just feels real good. And it doesn't matter if it's there or no effort. Okay, see that? And you can hear it ping. Now that sounds like a little bit of hocus pocus. Okay? And it does, but until you experiment and try and work on it, I used to sit for hours and play medium tempo jazz tunes and do nothing but play that stroke. Do no fills, just play calm until I knew I had that down. And then I learned it. One of the things, and that's the best way probably to practice it, but when you start to listen on that, that's the mainstay for jazz of the sound. And the great jazz drummers, that's their signature. That's, you know how everybody could write. You've seen how bad my writing looks, right? Okay, you know that mine doesn't look like your J, doesn't look at all like yours, right? And so that's your musical signature by the way you can play. I can hear 4 bars and know the difference between Art Blakey and Max Roach by the sound of their ride cymbal, how they phrase it, how they move, and how they come up with that sound. Is that? And if you think back, that's where we went all the way back to. Down, right? It came back all the way across. There's that 2, flip it to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 1, right? See what I mean? Yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of sound that you try to create, and the only way you get that is when people tell you, often read, you should be listening to jazz. They never go one more step. What do you listen to in jazz? What do you listen for in jazz? Well, you're going to listen to the drummer, all right? But if it's earlier stuff, and that's always the best way to have a little combination of some early jazz, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and whatever you like after that. And you start to hear the connection between that phrasing is the same throughout the eras. They may move it, they may play it more modern, you may hear better recording techniques, but the feel and all that, that's what they still strive after from, all right? From the early sandpaper blocks, first I ever heard about that was some New Orleans drummers doing that, and then people caught on to the brushes, which caught on over the years, and then into the sticks. And we gotta remember, 1930s, cymbals were not this big. When you listen to 1930s music, they weren't riding on the cymbal. They were playing on the snare drum. All right? And so there's different articulations that you're trying to make that smooth. Okay? Any questions about that? No? All right. So what I'll do is for the tape is I'll move up to the next thing to get a Latin groove for you, and then we'll break down and work on you guys individually. Okay? That sounds like a plan. So I was trying to think, okay, how am I going to come up with something that I can connect the two? And the handout, did you give them a handout yet? Okay, shame on you. You get a D minus. All right, so Patrick gets a D minus, and it's on tape. All right. Oh no, it's in blue paper. I was trying to think, like, okay, you guys look for things to practice over the summer, and maybe something that's what was it? Brushes, jazz, and Latin beat. And before all the jazz sambas and all the different kinds of books that are out talking about how to vary these different kind of beats, there was, and if you don't get one, I have copies. I can make some from the office, no problem. Is that there was the samba that was taught in most dance kind of studios and stuff, and you had to know these different dances. And so I thought, well, let's take a drum. And the drummer in playing Latin music more than anything is a percussion ensemble. And so using a traditional grip, you guys will always get tickled when I do that, is you're going to turn your hand over and play like this. Okay? And we're going to sound. And you can come up with all these kind of fun things to do, all from, and this is one of the things, again, you're trying to emulate a shaker, and this gives you an idea of trying to do this that people like paint it. There's your homework assignment for the summer. Everybody should be doing the samba, okay? Any questions so far? So there, I got it done in some form or the other. But we've seen history go a great deal from nothing from something as simple as sandpaper blocks that was used to what? Soften down the sound. Again, the phrasing from 2 to 3, 4 to 1 is our main jazz phrasing that we try to get with our hand and letting the stick do the effort. And getting in stroke from the snare drum pulse on out, okay? So I'm gonna do one more thing like what I did before for all you guys, so Justin has some things to chop up. And you guys got tickled about me playing a little bit, so I'll do that for the tape and then we'll start with you guys, okay? So what we try to do, so he knows what to do. Yeah, thank you, Justin. All right, take 2. All right, so how do you solo? And what you wanna do is that you still keep your form and you try to come up with something that is on the spare of the moment. And it has some things to do with what you are looking at your drums and how different things can happen. And sometimes it can be kind of a song is in your mind, and usually a song form is better to do those kind of things and soloing with that, meaning 4 bars, 8 bars, 16-bar phrases is something that you always try to play within. Why? That's how music is. And when you get to hear drummers play and you can almost feel the song come back around, and sometimes people, one of the best compliments goes, I knew where you were the whole time. I could hear the song playing. And so that's something you always want to try to do. And so usually you try to sing some of those things. I won't scare anybody off by singing right now, everybody, or break the machine. So, but you can play these different things and try to come up with something. So usually you want to not just immediately jump in. Usually it's good to try to feel some time and try to play a little bit. So if you're gonna be creative, that's what you have to try to do. And now, what's the hardest thing? Should you be practicing your marimba parts? Yes. And when you get done, then you do stuff like this, okay? It's real easy, and the hardest thing about going to school is how do you find that balance, okay? And you're coming up now to the time where after proofreading, all right? And after you got your finals done, then you can do those things in the summer. And then it's trying to find a balance after that, okay? Make sense? Okay, hope I've answered some questions on that, or things that maybe you've always wanted to know or have some ideas. So our next goal is try to get somebody to swing a little better, okay? We'll work on a ride cymbal, and then if any of you guys want to try